Hi, this is just going to be a short video about a recent trip I did to Las Vegas, Nevada, and I went to see the bodies exhibit. I've seen it before, but that was a few years ago, and things have changed inside of me. So there were different things I was looking for this time. So I wanted to share a few of those things. It's always interesting to me to see inside the body to kind of work out what it is I'm doing and what things are changing. So I'm going to share 3 photos with you. If you're squeamish about seeing dead bodies, they're preserved bodies, but if you're squeamish, then feel that feeling of squeamishness and see if you can work through the video. If not, maybe just skip this one. Okay, this, as you can see, is a head sliced in half. It's preserved, but you can see the bone structure and the brain structure. Now, if you've heard me talk before, if you've heard details of my story, like the really nuts and bolts details, you will have heard me talk about being able to see or sense inside from somewhere. So I'm looking from somewhere inside my head to somewhere else inside my body. And where I believe this place is, it's behind my eyes, but slightly lower than my eyes, and kind of not quite in the middle of my head, but behind my nose area. You know, it's hard to pinpoint from outside here. But where I think it is the sphenoid sinus. Now, I think that because I can tell whereabouts it is inside of my head, but also from symbology that I see, like from ancient Egypt and from words in the Bible. So there's talk about the Ark of the Covenant in the Bible and the makeup of it with golden rods and things, and with 2 thrones, which is where the 10 Commandments were supposedly found. You can see clearly in this image the sphenoid sinus. Now, there are 2 sinuses that are separated by a membrane, which is why there's talk about the 2 empty thrones and the 2 sets of instructions found in there. And above there is a kind of dip or depression inside the sphenoid bone, which is called the sella turcica. And it's like a saddle. It holds the pituitary gland. And I believe that is what they call the mercy seat of the Ark of the Covenant. So that was really interesting for me to see in detail there. From the nasal passage, there's a hole into the sphenoid sinus. And what I believe at this point, and I'm willing to be wrong about this, I don't know for sure, but this is what my belief is that on that first breath of life, when we are born, I believe part of spirit that is us, our personal part of the spirit, which could be called the soul, is breathed in on that first breath of life and sits there inside the sphenoid sinus until death, right? The last breath where we exhale at the end, where people who have a near-death experience going through a tunnel, a dark tunnel. I believe that is us moving out through the bone, through the nasal passage at death. So that is my theory on that. Again, who knows if it's true, but I believe it to be at this point. This is another head that is sliced in half. The bones, in this case, the neck bones were not sliced in half. They were kind of put back in afterwards. But to me, that was really interesting to see how far up inside our head those neck bones go, right? They go almost to the bottom of our nose level. So if you heard my last video, I talk about releasing the tension in those bones, in the jaw, in the neck, and in those top bones. I can feel and hear it releasing, and it's unlocking my neck, because the top 2 bones there are the atlas and the axis bones, which allow us to shake our head and to nod our head. That's where those movements come in. It's those 2 bones and the adhesions and the tension stored in the bones that prevent us doing that, or releasing that tension, which allows us to move like that. Another really interesting thing to me was seeing the bottom of the sphenoid bone and the top of the atlas bone, and seeing how such a short distance that is. Those 2 bones are not connected. As far as I could tell with the research I did, the atlas bone is connected to the cranium, the skull bone, but not to that inner sphenoid bone. So when you release the adhesions holding the atlas bone tense, what does that do to the sphenoid bone if it's loosened up? That to me is an interesting question. So here is another head that is totally sliced in half. So you can see those neck bones are in there. And again, you can see the bottom of the sphenoid bone and the top of the atlas bone. And there is very little distance there. But you can also see how much connective tissue is in there because it's solid, isn't it? Right? There's very little gap between any of those bones or any of those structures. Now this whole section here, you can see it's kind of pearlescent, the false cerebri, that separates the two cerebral hemispheres, the two sides of the cerebrum. And we only see the far side of the cerebrum here, and down there is the cerebellum. So those two parts of our brain are in charge of different aspects of our lives. So the cerebrum is more voluntary movements, intelligence and memory, whereas the cerebellum is more precision, coordination and timing and posture. So for me, it was really interesting to see those two different structures because, again, if you've heard me talk, you'll hear me say that I'm coming out of my thinking mind and into my sensing mind. And I wonder if maybe I'm coming out of the cerebrum and into the cerebellum. I don't know that to be the case. I just found it interesting that I'd been using those words and then was able to see those two different structures within the brain. I do wonder what's happening when I'm releasing this tension inside, releasing the connective tissue. What effect is that having on the brain itself physically? If it's held in tension because there's tension in the scalp and there's tension in the bones holding the brain tight, I wonder what that's doing to the brain and how this releasing of the tension in the face and in the skull and the bones and the teeth, what effect is that having on the brain itself? Just physically, is that releasing it so that it can move in different directions? Because the brain does move slightly. If you've ever read the Neuralink information that Elon Musk has been doing with his Neuralink, the person who had the little wires disconnect, they disconnected because the brain was moving millimeters at a time, which allowed the little connectors to disconnect. So our brains do move. And maybe if we release this tension in the skull, the brain is able to move more. And what does that mean? I don't know what that means, but it's an interesting question. Now, this is a slide from a previous video of mine, and it's because, I don't know if you can see it, but a cross formed between my eyebrows several years ago when I became able to put my awareness inside my body, which I believe is the opening of the inner eye. When that happened, I noticed this cross that had formed there, and it's slightly red, but I don't know if you can see it or not, and if you can't, that's okay. This may help you or it may not. That shows you where it is. It's actually kind of reverse of that. It's more of a pale cross on a pinker background. And it's obvious to me, so I'm sorry if you can't see it. I know some people can't. But it was really interesting to me to work out, how does the body do that? I have no idea how a body would form that, but I wanted to see what I could by looking at these bodies. And the only thing that was really interesting was seeing that it was the frontal sinus that is right there. Now, again, it's two sinuses together with a membrane between them. So right at that point of the cross, I don't know, it might just be the membrane there. I'm not sure. And maybe just the blood flow is more pronounced now than it was before, which would account for the pinkness. Still wouldn't account for the cross. I have no idea how the body formed that. Blows my mind. But anyway, it was really interesting to try and work out why things were happening and what was happening. So if you get a chance, I highly encourage you to go to the bodies exhibit in the Horseshoe in Las Vegas. was fascinating. I would encourage you to wear a sweater or to wear warm clothes because it was freezing in there. So I did not stay as long as I might have done otherwise. But it's really, really interesting. Okay, thanks. Bye bye.